Sensory Percussion 2.0 is here. The new collaboration between Evans and Sunhouse features redesigned sensors, brand new software, and the Evans Portal interface. So they're called sensors for a reason. They're not a trigger, they're not a microphone, they're its own category of things. So the sensors use some very clever technology combined with machine learning in the software to learn the nuances of your drums specifically. I'm really excited about this release because I've been using a similar kind of electronic setup with my band Sungazer for the last 10 or so years, using triggers. Now, triggers are a much simpler version of this. They're not nearly as expressive, they don't capture the nuances like you'll see later in this video. The sensors, on the other hand, are opening up a whole world of possibilities. The sensors pick up an incredible amount of real-time data about how and where you're playing on the drum. If I play in the center of the drum, it knows that right away. If I go to the edge, it knows that too. If I play a rim shot, oof, it knows that as well. And also, it knows the difference between that and a rim shot towards the edge here. Right, that's a different sound entirely. What if you want to play a cross stick? And you can hear there the pitch is changing as well, and that's because I've got it mapped to velocity. So as I play louder, the pitch changes. Other zones would be the rim, including stick tip on the rim versus the stick shoulder. And you can even map that to a continuous parameter change. You can go as far as playing a dampened hit. That's its own unique zone, or the shell of the drum. Even a stick shot is its own unique zone. So a single sensor is capable of picking up on up to 10 unique zones on a single drum. It also affords some very cool possibilities, like mapping the distance from the center to the edge of the drum to a MIDI parameter, or a parameter that you control in the Sensory Percussion software. Whether it's as simple as fading between one sound and another, or controlling effects like reverb. Of course, you can do the same thing with dynamics, the velocity of how hard you're playing, or even the speed, how fast you play. The possibilities are quite literally limitless and only limited to your imagination. Sensory Percussion version 1 was originally released in 2015 with a wildly successful Kickstarter. The company Sunhouse was founded by two brothers, and they managed to create something really, really special. Version 2 is greatly improved. I've had now quite a bit of time to play with these. Evans and Sunhouse were kind enough to send over an early prototype version late last year, and I also had a chance to use these on tour this spring with my band Sungazer. The Sensory Percussion sound system includes 3 sensors, the Evans Portal interface, 12 pickup elements, an EMAD adapter, a pair of ProMark drumsticks, all of the cabling necessary, and a QR code to download the Sensory Percussion software. Compared to version 1, this is one of the original sensors. Just looking at these, you can see that the new sensor is much smaller, much more compact, and just in general sleeker and more futuristic looking. Also, we've moved from an XLR connection on V1 to a smaller 1/8" stereo jack on V2. I've been loving the new design. It fits perfectly on every drum. Every drum that I've tried. That was an issue I had with V1, is on some drums it wouldn't quite fit. In fact, I think this might have been one of them, because it has a weird rim that kind of curves inward on the inside, and it would cause this to tip down and touch the head in a weird way. But I've had zero issues like that with V2. You've also got the EMAD adapter, so if you're like me and you enjoy using the Evans EMAD bass drum heads with the muffling ring, you can use this EMAD adapter. It just raises the sensor a little bit to get it up above that. And also in terms of performance, I've noticed that these sensors are much more reliable. It just picks up what you're playing a lot better than version 1, which is a little hit or miss for me, and that's coming from someone who's a long-time Sensory Percussion fan. Version 2 is like playing a different instrument entirely. It's so much better, and I don't know if that's a result of hardware improvements or upgrades in the software, probably both, but it's miles and miles beyond the original sensors which came out at this point like 8 years ago. One of the things that I love about this new system is that it just works. There's a very easy training process to get your drums set up. You can do it in just 2 minutes. So you would go here, you click on this plus sign, input, let's say sensor 2, which is my snare, and then here you click train. And so now I just play around at different velocities. Maybe use both sticks, just so it gets a sense of all the different ways that you might play in the center of the drum. Now let's move on to the edge. Rim, shoulder. And now the rim tip. And that's it. It should now know the difference between the center, the edge, the rim shoulder, and the rim tip. And it did that perfectly. The same thing applies to mesh heads. The advantage being that they're silent. These are the Evans DB0 heads. They're essentially silent. You're not going to hear it over these acoustic drums. The kick drum has its own mapping, so it knows like an open hit, for example. You can also hear a closed hit, where you bury the beater into it. It knows if you're hitting the rim, you can hit the shell, or you can hit the hardware, which would be these metal parts here. And then from there, you can hop in and already start playing sounds. You spend 5 minutes training all of your drums, if that, and then you can start playing around with sounds. And there's some really great presets already built into here, so you don't have to do any extra work. You just start playing and it works straight out of the box. The software in Sensory Percussion version 2 has been totally redesigned from the ground up. The software is designed to be a standalone application that covers all of your sensory percussion needs. So everything from training your sensors to editing and creating kits to mixing the final performance. Like version 1, it does have MIDI output capability as well, so if you want to work with another DAW like Ableton Live, you can do that using the MIDI Out feature. However, you don't need to have other software in order to experience the magic of sensory percussion. One of the key differences in V2 is we've decoupled the hardware inputs from the sounds, meaning that everything is now completely modular. You can link any input to any sound, and you can change that very quickly on the fly. In the past, everything you were doing was tied to an individual sensor input. So anything that the kick is controlling goes on the kick channel, anything that the snare is controlling goes on the snare channel. But what if I wanted to have 2 or 3 drums control the same instrument? Then you would have to create a duplicate of that instrument on each channel. So now that's not the case. You can have a single instrument channel with multiple inputs. So that makes the workflow much simpler, also saves on CPU because you don't have a ton of duplicates of the same instrument for no reason. And also it makes it easier to change volume levels when it comes time to mix your performance later on. So in the simplest scenario, we can drag and drop sounds on different parts of the drum. Let's keep it simple. So let's use 2 zones, and I only want the center and edge for now. We'll add more later. So I've got these samples here. We can go through and listen to them. Let's say we put that one on the center. How about that? Easy as that, drag and drop. Let's pick a different one for the edge. I kind of like that one. So, 2 different zones, 2 different sounds. It's as easy as dragging and dropping. If we want to change those sounds, we simply click on either one of these and it opens the sampler. And here's where we can listen to it. We can change the volume. We can change the length. We can reverse it, transpose the pitch of it. All of the essential things you want to edit about a sample, you can do here. I should also mention that there's a lot of great built-in effects here, so you can use the reverb or distortion, compression, delay, all those kinds of things are built into the software here. You can also manipulate sounds on a continuous spectrum. So let's say we don't want to have 2 distinct zones, but we want to fade between them. The easiest way to do this, there's a few different ways, but the easiest way is to shift-click one of these squares. And now you have this box around it which represents you're going to get a little bit of that sound. Not the full thing, but just like a little taste. Now, the other way to do this, which gives you a little bit more control, is to use what's called a hit controller. So you have some parameter here like snare, timbre, whatever it might be, and you can have that manipulate the stuff in this module list here. And watch how easy it is to change the proportions. Like how much percentage do I want of sample 1 versus 2? I can have a lot of sample 1, or I can have less. And then we can very easily change what variable we're talking about here. We can go select velocity, and now we have a fade not between zones, but between quiet and loud. Basically, any button or knob here can be assigned to be controlled by anything else. Like let's say the transpose one here. I right-click and then click New Assignment. And then I can choose all of these ways that I can manipulate the transposition or the pitch of this sound. As you would expect, you can do that a number of different ways, like with timbre, center to edge. You can do the same thing with speed. You also get the option to manipulate things based on an envelope. Every time I hit the drum, you get the same curve. Or you can reverse that. You can also do this using an LFO, since sensory percussion does have a low frequency oscillator built in. And last but not least, you have the option of controlling any of these parameters via MIDI. So if you have a MIDI keyboard with a knob or something you want to turn, you can have that control things in sensory percussion. Let me show you another device called a note controller. So all I need is a pitched sample here, and then I'll just draw in the notes that I want it to play. I'll draw in a scale, or let's do a C7 arpeggio. How's that? Based on how hard I play, I get the different pitches as mapped out here. And then, of course, if you change the scale, you get different notes. It's incredible to have a piece of software built by drummers for drummers. I have some videos on my channel about how I used to have to do this with triggers. If you want to see how hard your life can be without sensory percussion, go check those videos out. And then last but not least is the sequencer device. And this is one of the ones that I've been using the most. So let me just drag this sound and let me duplicate it a few times. And I'm just going to transpose these up. I have this sequence of 3 notes. And then of course you can change the order, you can reverse it, or you can do it totally random. Any element or module or device that exists in sensory percussion, you can drop into these sequencers. So I can put sequencers within sequencers to create chord changes. So let's make a new sequencer here. I'm gonna name this first sequencer C minor, because those are the chords. Or I don't know if it's C, but I don't have perfect pitch, but it's a minor triad for sure. I'm gonna drag this entire sequencer, C minor arpeggio, into this second sequencer, which I'm gonna call chord changes. I'm going to duplicate that and modify the second one. Let's just transpose everything up by one step, make it super obvious. So now we're going to have a C sharp minor for the second one. So here's our first chord. And then I click this arrow to go to the next one. Here's our second chord. First chord. Like everything else in sensory percussion, I can assign that action to any number of things. So let's say I want to hit this drum and that's what triggers the next chord. So I right click, new assignment, virtual input, snare 2. That's that one. And all that does is moves it to the next chord. So. very quickly, the other generators are audio inserts. So if you have a microphone, even if you wanted to have a stereo feed of your drums, send that in here as audio and then add effects to that audio signal, you can do that. In terms of MIDI out capabilities, we have 3 different devices within the Sensory Percussion software. The MIDI note generator looks like this. Basically select a drum and then tell it what MIDI note you want what zone to correspond to. And then the MIDI CC generator is the same thing, but for control change. Here I have snare velocity is CC 23, timbre is 24, speed is 25, and then basically anything you see in this menu you can use to send MIDI out. The final MIDI device is called a MIDI router, and this is a very specific device you would drop on a note controller module within Sensory Percussion. The note controller, as you remember, converts something like velocity to a scale that you draw in here. And then we can actually send those pitches out to something like Ableton Live. This software is designed with drummers in mind. Just little things like velocity curves. So easy to edit here. You click on any device, any module within Sensory Percussion, you right click this corner and you get a velocity IO, velocity in out. So if I want no dynamics at all, or if I want to have a curve that's more exaggerated, super easy to edit here, and they're constantly revising this. The new version 2.1, which just came out recently, added submixes, so you now have a very easy way to mix things and send different mixes to different outputs. And it's been really great to be in touch with some of the team members at Sunhouse and give them feedback based on what I'm doing in the real world, and like, hey, we've been doing this thing with Ableton for 10 years, so I kind of need to have that feature also here. Can we work on that? And they're like, oh yeah, great, that'd be awesome. Also new in version 2 is the Evans Portal interface. This works just like a regular audio interface, but it also has these sensor inputs here. So it can handle up to 7 simultaneous sensors. I have 5 currently on this drum set, so kick, snare, 2 snares actually, and 2 mesh toms here. Remember that V1 only supported up to 4 sensors, and you had to bring your own interface and your own XLR cables and everything. So having this very compact 7-channel thing, it's designed specifically for this purpose. That's really, really great. In addition to that, you've got 4 total audio inputs. So there's 2 XLR 1/4-inch combo jacks on the front and 2 1/4-inch inputs on the back. And then you've got 6 audio outputs in the back. And then you've actually got an ADAT plug, which gives you 8 additional channels. For monitoring, the Evans Portal has both a 1/4-inch and an 1/8-inch headphone jack. These are tied to the same headphone mix and volume knob, but remember you've got all these other outputs in the back if you need additional monitoring. The included USB cable is a USB-C connection on both sides. There is also the USB-A adapter if you don't yet have a computer with USB-C ports. Last but not least, there is a 5-pin MIDI output on the back, and the software itself also gives you plenty of options to send out MIDI virtually using things like IAC driver. A couple other things you'll get are the sensor cables. These are just a standard 1/8-inch stereo cable. However, you do have the bent tip here, which is nice for the sensors. And also one thing I really appreciate is the length. They're nice and long, so you have absolutely no problem stringing these all the way around your drum set from your laptop. You will also get the power cable, obviously, but one thing I really like about that is it's got interchangeable plug tips. So if you need the UK version or the EU version or the North America version, very easy to switch those out, which is great for all of us touring musicians. You also get a little box of these pickup elements, which is how the sensors work because they use magnets. You attach this little tiny piece of metal, this little dot. It doesn't hurt the drum head or change the sound. You just attach this little dot, and then that is what the sensor is listening for. It's able to detect how that dot is moving in relation to the magnet. I don't fully understand the sorcery which is happening inside these things, but that's how you get this wonderful system. So you get 12 of these pickup elements. Generally speaking, you're not using very many of these unless you're changing drum heads or putting them on new drums. So 12 would last you quite a while. If you do need more, you can buy these little packs of them. So a couple things I learned on the road. First of all, this system is very stable, very robust. I had 0 issues in terms of performance, like no software crashes or anything like that. Sensors, super accurate. I was traveling with my own drums, the same drums every night, which obviously helps because the sensors were trained for those drums. But even when I had to train them, because there was, halfway through the tour, I changed all my drum heads, got fresh heads, and fortunately it was super quick and easy. So, 2 minutes and I was done. Couple pro tips for live performances. One is I found this laptop stand on Amazon. I'll try and find it and link it below. This portal interface fits perfectly underneath, so I can have everything in a very tight space, essentially in 2 levels. And I put double-sided Velcro on each side so that if somebody walks past and bumps it, it's not going to move. Nice and stable. And the other thing I did was I made a custom hard case for the sensors. I think this is maybe something they're working on for at some point in the future. I don't know. I don't want to make any promises on their behalf, but in the meantime, what I found works really well is you just take the foam out of the box that it comes in, you cut it so that you only have the part for the interface and the sensors, and I found this, again, random case on Amazon that worked pretty well. When version 1 first came out, the Kickstarter and everything, I was super excited about it. I got one of those original sensors, but I'll confess I didn't quite go as deep as I would have liked to, and a lot of that was due to just some limitations of the early sensor physically attaching to my drum in some cases, and the sensors not being as reliable and accurate as they are now. So to open up version 2, put them on the drums, spend 5 minutes training them, and everything just works. And then there's a bunch of preset sounds in there. I spent, an entire day just going through and playing through all those different sounds. It was really fun. It just works straight out of the box, which is an amazing thing, to be able to bring this to a larger audience and to improve the tech, because now the partnership with Evans means they've got the resources to manufacture these things to a really high degree. I think this is a partnership that really, really makes sense on a number of different levels. First of all, because Evans is such a technologically forward-thinking drumhead company. That's why I play the drumheads. That's why I endorse them, because Evans is the company pushing innovation forward, even with the drumheads before we talk about sensory percussion. So to bring sensory into the mix makes a lot of sense and also allows Sunhouse to do what they're best at. When I first tried this, when they sent me the prototypes, I was blown away because I didn't have to work at anything. I just stuck it on the drum, I trained it in 2 minutes, and then I started playing with the presets, and it just all worked. It recognized my drum, how I was playing it, and it was just like musical creative joy. And so that is the beauty of version 2. It's a really exciting time to be a drummer. There's a lot of applications that I haven't even touched on, like using it as a practice kit. Like if you want to use these mesh heads and be totally silent, but have the full expression of all these 10 zones. I mean, there's a crazy amount of sounds you can get out of this. And then, of course, if you want to do your own electronic hybrid thing and create your own instruments, you can do that as well. So if that's something that might interest you too, check out the links below. And a big thank you to Evans and Sunhouse for sending over these sensors and this amazing software. I'm really stoked to be using it. Already had a blast with it on tour, and I'm looking forward to taking this much, much further. Links are below. Thanks for watching, and talk to you soon.